Our viewers, we are back. We are new in town, but we're excited about telling you stories. I'm a storyteller, and I want to really emphasize and build on telling African stories. And we take for granted that in telling our stories, in crafting our stories, we depict our values. Now imagine this scenario that in Africa, one of the values that we are losing is the ability to feed people when they came to us. So one of the stories I've enjoyed gathering is my Samburu friend telling me when you entered a Samburu homestead, you're given water mixed with milk. Recently, I visited a Somali woman, and she was so gracious. She gave us bottled water, and she said, in our community, when someone comes to your house, you give them water before you even have a conversation. My guest today is not just a storyteller, but is a story gatherer by the virtue of being a media practitioner and a journalist. And he has depicted that value of African hospitality in his media practice. And this is something I want to celebrate because I celebrate unsung heroes and acts of heroism that are taken for granted. Now, I want to diss on the big guys because they are losing our values. You'll go to one of the biggest TV stations and they will make you talk for 3 hours, not a glass of water. My guest has hosted people in his practice, and we had a gathering last year in December to celebrate what this channel has done. And one of the things everybody talked about was that hospitality. And he's going to tell us, introduce himself and say, is it the mother who told him, chakula ni kitu ya kunyima mtu? That is a joke in Kenya right now, the Kenyan dictionary, where you say, is water something you fail to give someone? Today I'm honored to have an unsung hero and a champion for justice, who is also called Justus. Karibu.
With all the drums. I'm so glad to be here, Redemptor.
Yes.
You're doing a very good job. This is something I think we've been talking about for the longest time, because this is your space.
Yes.
And I'm one of those people who are very proud, especially when I saw the first video going up, because we all have been procrastinating for the longest time about this.
Is this feeling like you're trained?
Yes.
I'm skilled. For me, it's a gift. So coming into your space, I remember, because I document people's stories from that African aspect. And that's why I'm able to notice, how come I have been to a main media house, just as I went to a vernacular station from 9 p.m. to midnight. They didn't offer me even water to sip as I spoke. And so when I come to your channel and I notice, because I've been there when I was there to tell a story or just for us to do the stories we do together, because that's what we want to talk about. I noticed that interaction and I saw the African spirit, and I'm like, what do they teach in journalism school about hospitality? Like, you go to Turukana and my dry region, and you're telling a story and you have your water in the car. Is it the African, the upbringing? Is it just your personality? And is it something we need to talk about, the way I've projected it here, that it's rude for someone just to come to your station and the people there are Africans and they know this is a practice of Africans, and then they start copying. This is a corporate. They get the corporate image and they don't give you something. So just tell me why you do it that way.
I think it's a mix of all those things you've mentioned. But, I mean, given the kind of stories that I do, or the kind of content that I produce, you dealing with very personal, issues and stories, things that people rarely talk about in public. So first of all, for you to have someone opening up and talking about their very personal life and secrets, you have to create an environment that is welcoming, an environment that, they will first feel safe, and home. So one of the things that make home what it is food.
Yes.
That
water, that mixture of water and milk by Samburu.
Yes.
Yes.
So for me, it was not even an afterthought. It just clicked immediately that I needed, first of all, to create the environment, a safe space of some sort. Yes. I would succeed in having people talk about themselves. Yes. They have to, first of all, feel that they are in a space that they can be vulnerable and no one is judging them, and it's like they are talking to a brother, you're talking to, a friend. And so that is how that thing comes in. One of the reasons why, for me, I have to mix. It's not just recording and going. No,
The home feel
the home
hospitality.
feel and the hospitality. And also, I think it has a lot to do with my upbringing. I grew up in the village.
Oh, sweet
and
potatoes are in plenty.
in the village, it's everybody's business to, take care of the other.
Okay.
I remember days because when meals were ready, we were actually eating not in the house,
Yes.
but just outside the house. And we are just next to the main road. So you just washed your hands. And as kids, the meal sometimes looks not really enough for all of you, that family. But suddenly, someone is just passing and they're like, "Oh, we're having a meal. Can you join us?" You're like, "Really?" But I think over time, that culture then, you tap into it. And before you know it, it becomes a way of life.
Yes.
So for me, I mean, food ni kitu ya kunyimana, really.
The way I said, Maji, a multi-million industry, the sector that is actually diluting the values. And someone
Yeah.
would think this is such a minimum point for me to raise. But it's also what is becoming of our society,
Yeah.
where people don't even have that generosity anymore. We almost get into a point when we know visitors are coming, we hide food, or we are
Yeah.
going the Western way of saying, you cannot come to my house without an appointment. So I start on that note and maybe just use your story as an example and celebrate your hospitality so that other media practitioners can realize that some of these people are so desperate to tell their story for therapy. They've come to your place, they've borrowed bus fare sometimes.
Yeah.
And I know I won't talk about the envelopes, I won't put you in an awkward place, but I know you go out of your way. And brings me to, I document stories of heroes. And I don't want to call people heroes and then wafure kichwa, but really kindness is becoming endangered. And so as we tell stories, as we practice in whichever field, I'm very keen to note a very kind doctor, a kind matatu
Yes.
driver. And every time I get in a matatu, before I get out of the matatu, I tell the driver, thank you. I tell the
And
conductor,
it goes
thank
a
you.
long way. It rubs off the other person.
Yes.
You could be doing something that is really simple and basic. You can't, sometimes you don't even think about it.
Yes.
For me,
Yes.
the things you're mentioning about, someone coming to the studio and you're offering them something to eat. For me, it's the bare minimum. So I don't even think about it. But I was surprised, like you mentioned, during our anniversary, when people could point it out as something that was unique. So I was like, really? Is it unique? So only to realize that it goes a long way, in even informing how the other person then responds to the conversation that follows after that. Because I've had people who come to the studio to, record. Someone is very sure what they are not coming to say. They might not know what they are saying, they are coming to say,
Me
but they are
included.
sure what they are not coming to say.
Me
But because of the
included, yes.
environment, the hospitality that you create even before the recording, they become so free that they end up, spilling the beans and saying the things that they never even planned to say.
And it's because they're not feeling like you're just plucking their story from them. They're feeling like you're taking them on a journey of either seeking closure, justice. Now we are discovering that people are coming to you because they also want justice. And it brings me to, I go to people's spaces and I notice things that I shouldn't notice because of the nature of documentation. So one of the things I noticed when I came to your setup was you had done a story of someone who was going through medical affliction. Really a lady who had gone through it all. Like her story would be like she's the poster of all the adversity someone could go through. And what that happened after you did the story of Josephine, then there's another girl, much younger girl, who looked so old because of what she was going through. And I watched just as you and your family went out of your way to pay hospital bills for that family. And so it's for me why you're in this station is maybe to challenge other people who are taking these stories. I have been on the show Shared Moments with Justus. And many people who know this channel have never seen Justus because he stays behind the scenes. And when I went to his show, I had been to a TV station and talked about my pain. And I came to his show and I said, Justus, people are prostituting people's pain. And I'm coming to your show to hold you accountable. And I'm so encouraged because I've seen now You do the story of someone who's gone through, who needed their life to be saved. It was not just about telling a story. And you are not one of those big channels where you can collect from Kenyans money, but you did it with dignity, that you even went out of your pocket and said, what, if people give, they give. If they don't give, then that's fine. This is my way of giving back. The challenge, did you know what you're getting yourself involved when you started this channel? Did you see that? Did you see that coming?
There are so many things that we have learned along the way, and God has revealed himself in different ways as we progress. Because when I was beginning, yes, I had an idea of what I really wanted to do with this platform. But over time, God has used people who I've interacted with and those who have come to the show to open my eyes and to see things in a different way. Um, of course, as a journalist, you would want to, communicate, educate, and create awareness and things like that. But it got to a point that I had to now be very intentional about even the kind of stories that I wanted to really, allow on the channel, so that it's more than just storytelling, but allowing people to give and tell stories that will make a difference, not just in their own lives, but in the lives of those who would listen to those stories. And so, coming to the story that you have alluded to, that is Maureen, the lady who had a problem with her, not just her eye. I mean, medically, she was just a shell of a person. And I remember the day that we asked her to come. She actually came very early in the morning. She was at the door at 4 a.m.
Oh gosh. Where
She
did
was
she come
supposed
from?
from Nakuru.
Okay.
She was supposed to come to be on set by 9 in the morning. But she was so desperate that she couldn't
She knew
just.
she was going to die.
Yes. So she was in my house by 4 a.m. And when I looked at that girl, her eye was just something else. Mess. It was a mess. And everything wrong. Everything was just going wrong with her life. I listened to her and I said, this girl needs more than just telling her story. Of immediate is finding a way to make her or get her to see a doctor.
Yes.
And so I remember that morning, immediately we did the story and we made an appeal to our audience so that they can come on board. I said, because we are not usually doing these stories in real time, they are not live,
Yes.
it will take some time before this message gets to the people.
Yes.
And her condition is just worsening by the hour. So immediately we finished the recording, we got in touch with the hospital, Kenyatta Hospital. And we allowed her to take some rest. She actually spent at my place.
Okay.
She was supposed to go back to Nakuru immediately, but I said, no, you wait. I know this story is going to take some time before people come to hear of it and perhaps help, but I just want you to go to hospital even before you go back home. So the following morning, the first thing, we took her to Kenyatta Hospital, where she saw a doctor, and when the doctors looked at her, they said, you need to be in theater like the next hour.
Okay.
So to cut the long story short, she was admitted, and because we had not collected any funds from anyone, someone had to. So we had to find a way of at least, meeting the bills and paying off the other expenses that came with that. In fact, by the time we were airing the story, she had already under, the surgery. The surgery had already happened, which cost quite some money, and a lot of other things. She was smiling. She was a human being again. So this is one of those things and stories that really make me want to really do this. For me, it's more than just, telling stories. I'm really motivated and inspired when I see a life that is transformed because I was involved. Because I know some of these things, God can use anyone. Yes. And, we might be tempted at times to want to take credit for things that God has allowed us to be part of. It was not me, he would have used any other person. Yes. But the fact that through me, something was done, God was able to transform that person's life, it's a privilege, yes. It's an honor. And it makes me want to be in the line of God's service so that I get to inspire the more I can. Yeah. So.
As someone who documents, another thing that I'm holding people accountable, I am really determined to become the whistleblower of storyteller. Is here was a woman, and this is graphic, this might be triggering. She was decomposing, her body was just falling in pieces. Justus has the ability as a trained journalist to take cameras and follow this story. And there's a story that is always told that we'll have to confirm about a journalist who follows a child until they die. And we are becoming like vultures, even as we seek stories. And I waited to see if maybe at a point in this storytelling, you would document the journey of this very vulnerable woman. But you didn't. So what I saw was the after. So you did, the before was done in secret. Yeah. You had to do the appeal because you needed well wishers. And so for me, I want to use the people who give me access to hold them accountable in how they tell their stories, to tell them that it's more than just following every beat. I've seen now the political class are actually documenting their good acts. Yeah. Service to humanity. First, they are paid to do it. And then why do you need to prove that you helped all these people? So people are coming to you to give their stories, but you're going behind the scenes and you're doing the African hospitality, generosity. So when someone would be like grossed, like, no, you can't bring a sick person to sleep in your, but this is a life at the verge of dying. Then now we start talking because you discover that I don't just tell stories, that I have networks where I make calls about stories. And then a new problem knocks at your door. Human trafficking, our girls in Saudi Arabia. Take me through that.
So, of course, we have done a lot of stories since we began about 2 years ago. And if you go to the channel, you will see there are, different kind of stories. But there are those that stand out. And human trafficking being one. I'm happy that you've called it what it is, human trafficking. Because we want to baptize it and call it many other things. Yes. But it's basically human trafficking, where we have our girls mostly in other parts of the world that are being subjected to what no one should in the name of employment and
they've actually been sold. Now there are clips that have come out. BBC has done a feature on it to show that Africans are being sold in the Arab world. Yeah. And being passed. Or you find a girl in that situation where the employer is not going to release her, but somehow she finds your number. Take me through that. Just getting that phone call. Yeah. Over very, very desperate, because you had these stories, but it has never knocked on your door. Yeah. So tell me how that was like, almost like, because now you started getting too many other stories, and you felt the need now to start looking for legal redress on this case. What
because
was that like?
Sometimes things are too distant because they have not affected you directly. So your level of engagement is limited on the basis of sinasikianga wasichana wanaenda huko, wengine wanateswa, but it has never happened, any clause.
Like someone calling you from Warabuni. Yes. And crying.
So this time, I didn't even receive a phone call because she didn't have my number. Okay. I got an email because I usually give my email address on the stories. Sure. So I got an email, a write-up of a girl who is saying that she's trapped in Saudi Arabia. She's been there, her contract, she's done everything that she was supposed to do within that period of time, but the employer has refused to let her go, to release her. He's even holding her, salary, her money. And the person who facilitated her, the agent, is not even responding to her calls. So she desperately needs help. Kindly, if you can, reach out to me or give me your number. I need help.
Were you tempted to just walk away from this one? Because you knew, I mean, and to be honest, your channel is a part-time
Yeah,
thing. It's not
it
your
is.
full-time
It
thing.
is.
And now you know, you've already done the medical ones and you've
Yes.
seen how involving they are. And they tug at your heart because you're actually seeing someone dying.
Yeah.
Now another one is
For
coming.
this particular one, I knew from the beginning that there's no way I can help. I knew for sure. For this one, I can't help. I don't know how to help. I've never dealt with anything of this nature. So I don't even know who to call. I remember you were among the very first people I called when I got this information from this girl to find out, how do I go about this? Even before I got back to her, how do I go about this? And you gave me some suggestions of, how we could proceed. Then I wrote back to the girl. I sent her my, WhatsApp number. Then she actually sent me voice notes and called me.
And
And now we started.
now you are hooked because now this
Now
was a
I'm
really
hooked because her hearing from me was just now another thing. Hope. Yes, she had lost hope. Now, someone calling you from Kenya, when you really needed someone to speak to, just a voice of assurance that things can actually, even without me saying that I'm working on anything, a solution of
Just
any
the
type,
phone call,
just the
returning her
phone call,
call.
returning her call meant so much for her. And that even burdened me the more. And I was really, I remember I really prayed so hard for God to just do something because personally I didn't have any way out. And so what happened, I told her, I really encouraged her and assured her that things were going to be okay and she was going to come back to Kenya. How? I don't
She
know.
didn't know.
I didn't know at that time. And to be honest, up until now, I don't know how that girl came back. Okay. She thinks that I did so many things to make her come here, but I did very little because when we talked for that period of time, I asked her to give me the contact details of the agent, the local agent.
Because that's what
back
the
here in Kenya.
human rights organization required.
Yes. So she did so. I called the agent, and the agent was not very friendly, even with me. So what I did, I recorded that conversation with the agent.
Okay.
And I had introduced myself as a journalist, and I mean, I was really friendly. And so at the end of how we ended our conversation with the agent is she was actually ranting and calling me names, and she hung up on me. She hung up. So when she did so, I just stopped the recording and forwarded her the same recording.
The agent.
The agent, yes.
Wow.
I forwarded the same recording
Now that's good journalism.
to the agent.
That's good
herself.
journalism. That's when that's what the stuff investigative journalism is born of.
So I think when she listened to herself in that recording, she was very scared. She was very scared because she had said very nasty things that were actually self-incriminating. So she was scared. Immediately, she called the lady in Saudi Arabia. She had never called her for the longest time.
Wow.
She didn't call me. We never talked after that. But she called the lady, and the following day, that lady called me crying, now not tears of sorrow but tears of joy, that I've just been called by the agent because of the conversation you had. In fact, she was begging me to ask you not to with those recordings and those kind of things, that she is willing to assist me.
Okay.
So that was the beginning of her journey back to Kenya.
You pulled a Sonko on her. You won't tell people who Sonko is. Justus thinks he did nothing. But the power of us getting justice, and we are living in hard times, is just to know how powerful a storyteller is, a whistleblower is. And without knowing, because we had conversations when we celebrated 1 year anniversary of shared moments with Justus, and we knew for sure we were starting to tell stories for justice. And that's where now the networking of me telling you the information that this is what happens with seeking legal aid. As soon as you tell someone, I'll call a lawyer, or we've been somewhere before where we we snitched on ourselves. We said we are journalists, we are human rights defenders, and you know what happened in that scenario. But just knowing, I think you're beginning to realize what a gift it is to be a storyteller.
Yeah.
Just because you picked your phone, you called someone who was in distress. And she talked about suicide. You remember? She talked about suicidal thoughts at the lowest, because
Yeah.
she had been away for 2 years,
More than 2 years.
and she had left a child
She had
behind.
left I think, a 2-year-old,
Yes.
a 2-year-old boy, and she had gone to Saudi Arabia because she was now more or less the breadwinner. She had lost her mother, her father, and the other siblings were looking up to her. She's the firstborn, desperately, trying to find ways, sometimes we want to use words that are also not very friendly in trying to describe those who have relentlessly ignored the calls for people not to migrate to the Arab world in search of greener pastures. But we never pause to ask ourselves what would make someone, want to, like you don't care about your safety anymore as long as you'd get an opportunity to make ends meet. So it's not an easy call for them either, but this is someone who had really put a lot on the line to be in Saudi Arabia to begin with. And so for me, it was an opportunity to really ask God. I said, if nothing happens through me, at least I'm praying for this girl. Let me just pray for her.
Yes.
And I mean, God has a way of doing things in his own time. So it was just the best thing that happened this year when that girl finally came to Kenya. I told her, don't sleep, come to my house. I want to see you. I want to see
Finally,
you.
you saved a life. I mean, the story was just amazing at very small circles, and I'm beginning to see a narrative where we are the fourth estate because you're a journalist. But again, what you're doing is the fifth estate, where anybody can take a camera and seek justice for someone. But I look at and I've been pushing people who are skilled and trained in journalism to be aware about human rights in journalism, because a lot of people are very insensitive to when we just tell a story, what was the justice seeking. And I remember I made calls and wanted to find out what you needed to do, and I relayed some of the information back. But that phone call you made to the agency, and the wisdom and the skill of a journalist to record that conversation and then to use it against her. But like you're waking our conscience up. Like, listen to yourself. Are you listening to yourself?
Yes.
A Kenyan girl is trapped somewhere. She just wants to come home. And viewers, you'll have to watch some of his shows on Shared Moments with Justus, because they're really life-changing stories. Because when this girl finally comes to Kenya, she opens up about her life. And you find out there's childhood trauma that was involved. And then when our members of parliament are having discussions about our girls in those countries, they don't factor that they should have centers, crisis centers for them. They should have counseling services for them when they come, because there's no employment. These people are so desperate. So we have done human trafficking, and then now we come to a very hashtag shared stories for justice with Justus. I think one of the most proudest projects I've been involved with were because of you. Because when I look at your channel, you have a mix. You have the older generation, you the younger generation, and I'm beginning to see it's like a family where you connect people. You find people who are fighting for the custody of their child, then another person comes. You find people who've been in prison, then other people come. You find people, it's like you're building a community for support groups. Addictions, yes, you've done a great job. Amazing people on your show talking about your addiction, and I hope one of them can come to my show, because he has written a book and he's doing something. He has survived that addiction and now he's helping other people. So looking at the community that you're building, it's unique. What I have in common with you, and probably why we work together and why I'm celebrating you today, is that people want us to have numbers. And when we associate our impact and how big we are because of the following. And that's when I tell you about the prostitute. I can never meet a journalist and not throw that word. Prostituting people's pain, where we take the story and we walk out. And the best example I can give, this one is when we have dental issues. I know that story. And people ask, why do you have a tooth decay? You didn't take care of your tooth. And that's what happens with the girls from who go to Arab world, girls who've been violated. You're like, you start even questioning. But then journalism and storytellers are beginning to do something that is temporary. These are solutions, myths about put clove on your cavity, but there's even a pharmaceutical called touch and go. And we're beginning to do touch on, and go, and we are leaving people to go and die. Because if you touch and go on a story of someone who is almost committing suicide in an Arab world, and you picked that call, and you touched, and then you left, I think years from now, it will start to haunt you, that you took these people's stories, you touched and went. And that's why I'm celebrating and trying to hold the smaller channels accountable so that we kill these monsters of big channels where you go tell your story, you're not even given a cup of water, you're not even given bus fare. And sometimes some of us who want to use our stories to help, we are told we are paid with exposure. So they will call you, they want you to tell them their juicy story. So let's go to our very biggest story. In December, we meet, we celebrate 1 year anniversary. And then by April, a story knocks on your door. Tell me about why you went out of your way in the story of McKenna and you did something that is not you, because you never come in front of the camera. Since Shared Moments with Justus was started, he has only appeared on camera once with a gentleman who had been in prison for, remember the story?
Yes, for 20 years.
For 20 years. That
Yes.
was the first time I ever
Yes.
saw you. And after that, you never ever appeared on cameras again until April 2021. What drove you to the camera? So that we share a bit of this story, so that we celebrate the moment of getting someone's freedom. What made you change, and what was this story about?
The story of McKenna.
Yes. And she's been on your show, by the way.
You know, the stories with good endings are just beautiful stories. And they give us the energy. Well, while we're still struggling with these other stories that we are doing follow-up to make sure that people, get help, these other stories where we're already seeing results, I mean,
They energize
they
us.
energize us. And so that is exactly what, finally happened to me once I got involved in the story of McKenna. And you, of all people, should be celebrated, not even me, when it comes to how the story of McKenna has unfolded, because you have been at the forefront in seeking justice for McKenna and making sure that all stakeholders, everybody who can do something about this case, comes on board.
Tell us what is the story of McKenna. Our viewers might not know who this lovely girl is. Just tell us why you got involved in this story.
Yeah.
What touched you about this story? And I'll tell you what touched me about that story. Yes, what touched you about this story? Because this was out of, a guest comes to your show,
Yes.
tells her story.
So this was another guest that I had hosted, who talked about her journey and what she was doing. She had been in prison herself before, so she was just giving her story and what she's currently doing, reaching out to other people who find themselves, behind bars like she was. And so that is when she mentioned the story of McKenna. She had met McKenna in Mwingi prison. So McKenna had been in Mwingi prison for a period of, how long was that? I think
7 months.
7 months.
7 months.
Yes. And the reason being that McKenna, who is a 21-year-old girl by that time, had been in prison because she was not able to raise 100,000 cash bail, was it?
Yes, it
Or
was a fine.
It was a fine
It was
of
a fine.
100,000.
It was really a case of miscarriage of justice.
Miscarriage of justice, because
wrongfully charged. That's what the
wrongfully
charge.
charged, really.
Yes.
She found herself in the shoes that her employer was supposed to really be. And so, of course, we have the story. You can be able to get all the details. But for me, when I got a chance to listen to what this girl was going through, serving a sentence over something that she was not even guilty of.
3 years.
3 years, yes. And the person who is supposed to be serving that sentence is out here enjoying life and doesn't even care about her well-being, I was really touched about that. And I said, I mean, if there's something I can be able to do, first of all, what this girl needs is to get
Her
out of this place,
freedom,
her
her
freedom.
freedom.
Even as we follow up with other legal
Or what happened,
issues,
trying to
and
find out.
how this thing, what she needs first of all is to get out of prison. And so I remember that's the first time or second time really I told the lady who had come to my channel. Her name is Judy, who also has a YouTube channel. So I told Judy, this is my first collaboration I'm doing with another
You've
content
never
creator.
done.
I've never
For a
done.
worthy cause, you're
Yes,
willing to share the
but
space. Yes.
I'm willing. I'm
Yes,
willing to
yes.
share the space.
And appear in front of cameras.
Yes. So we did a collaboration
Yes.
with Judy,
Yes.
and made an appeal.
Yes.
That appeal somehow people really connected and resonated with the story. After that, somehow the greatest storyteller of all time, Redemptor, found herself in the mix, and her emotions could not allow her to just be on the sidelines, but to be at the forefront. I remember even you creating now another platform, even for fundraising and also the legal team. So we were able to raise the money that was needed. We were able to put together a team, a legal team, to even advise and follow up on the case of McKenna. As we speak, I mean, you're best placed to even tell us how McKenna's life has been transformed. She is out. She's no longer in prison. She's been enrolled into training institution, tertiary institution. She's doing life. And I mean, what else can we ask for?
She is.
Yeah.
She is. And the African spirit for me in this story was we like to get many people who are in the same situation, make this our project,
Yeah.
and that's start fundraising. But I'm because of trying to run away from always looking to the West. When I started this channel, I said we've developed a culture of victimhood, and we are breaking the community structures. And this is not a story that is even ready to be told now, because she's a young woman who needs her privacy.
Yes.
But the community that was failed her, there's a whole community. The failure happened at very many levels.
Because we would have stopped and started, the blame game, because I mean,
Yes.
there were so many other people that
Yes,
you would
yes.
really not even struggle to say that. I mean, it's because of this and this and this or this
that
person
happened.
that
Yes.
you're
And
where
I'll
you
tell
are.
this story one day from that perspective of some of the people who I call heroes. And I'm using this word with a lot of generosity, because people need to be patted in the shoulder, because like the show you do, if you're not careful, it can break you, because the focus would be, this one was violated as a child, this one their property was taken away, this one the child was taken away, and you're like, are we, like I've said, are we lawless and heartless? So the reason I do this is to counter that narrative that we don't have good hearts, people of goodwill in Africa, and so we have to depend on donor aids for every little thing. So this is one of the cases where the community, the local community, I remember the community from where she comes from, and not even her county, the neighboring county, the professionals of that community acted within, because they had not seen it until almost the last minute. So that's another story. Now we talk about shared moments with Justus, being a community of people who are telling personal stories. Which of these stories has changed you the most? I know you've done 1 year, you've done many
Yeah.
guests, and are you willing to continue with this journey, or do you just want the safety of employment? I mean, something has happened in your life. 1 year of doing these stories, and what do you want to tell a new content creator who just wants the likes, who wants that method of touch and go? I'll tell a very graphic story. I get the clout I get from that story. What are you learning? The balance of, yes, we need to expose these stories in big platforms for raising support, but we also have to have human dignity in our storytelling. What?
If you ask me which story has impacted me the most, I think it's the most difficult question, because each story has had a way of, inspiring me uniquely. So I can draw a lot of inspiration from each of the stories. But cumulatively, I think it has made me realize a lot of things in life that perhaps I was not so keen about before I started this, because I'm dealing with people from all walks of life on a daily basis and hearing things that sometimes you're like, because I'm like being introduced into every other segment
Of
of life or
social, of
social.
segments of even social problems.
Yes,
The,
yes,
the impacts of divorce and
yes.
custody battles, the impact of
So one, on a positive note, you find that you learn a lot, because if you're dealing with a case of miscarriage of justice, then you have to really learn about what the law says about that kind of thing, and if you are dealing with issues of divorce or child support and those kind of things, you have to really learn about it, and so it has helped me on a positive note, to really learn about things that I could ordinarily never even have interest for. And on the other hand, it has humbled me to know that sometimes you just have to appreciate the much or the little that you have before you cry so loud about what you're missing. There's so much around you that you can celebrate, because if someone else opened up about what they are going through, you just thank God for what you already have. And then talking about the numbers, content creators or journalists or people who are in the media space trying to do things for the clout. It's a temptation that many content creators, especially on YouTube and those kind of platforms, find themselves, and the pressure is real. But I think you have to find a way out if you're in it, because there are those who are basically there for the money and the clout. So these are the things we are talking about really don't even bother them a bit. But if somehow you still have some element, iota of concern for another person, then you need to be a little intentional so that you're not lost in the numbers. Yes, the numbers are important, as you've said, for us to be able to reach as many people as possible. But even just that one person watching or listening to you, that's a life. So if you have one view on a video on YouTube, it's not just some abstract thing. That's a person who has, taken their time to listen to you.
and your shows are long, Justus.
I struggled with that because coming from a journalistic background, myself, I didn't imagine that someone can sit down and listen to a clip or a story for more than 10 minutes. So at first, I really didn't want to do those long stories. I wanted to do something short. But I said, let me just do this particular one, the first story I did. Let me just give them as it is, and then going forward, I'll try to make make them short. Oh,
They became longer.
they became longer, but I realized that as long as the content is enriching, the content is one that people can connect with, it doesn't matter how long it is, they will still watch. So for lack of a better word, I think I'm an instrument that I want to, at the end of the day, inspire other people who have the abilities and the opportunities that I have to do what they can within their space, because I cannot be everywhere. And so for me, it's not even a competition. In any case, I want to be an inspiration that any other person who has good intentions can replicate what I'm doing in their own space. It doesn't have to be online. It could be anywhere else. But if I can encourage someone else to do good in their own small way, for me, I think I'll have achieved more than I ever dreamt. Yeah.
I have said before that Kikuyus have a saying, the cows cannot finish for each other grass.
Yes.
And as African storytellers, we must stop competing for the sob stories. And we now must start, and that's why you do, sometimes your stories you do before and after. We've seen the story of Maureen, who the one was medical, had medical, you've done before and after.
Yeah.
And I hope Justus will be generous to do for us a snip net. Where? of the journey with McKenna.
Yes.
We are going to take a small break, then we come and conclude of what the collaborating as storytellers, holding each other accountable as storytellers, so that we grow ourselves as storytellers. And years to come, we didn't write books because times had changed. Now we held our cameras, but how do we hold our camera responsibly?
Yeah.
How do we still have ethical practices even as we tell stories? We'll be back.